Hey guys, I just figured I'd make a really quick intro video on what I'm going to refer to Nietzsche as Nietzschean mythology. Just like the metaphysical context that Friedrich Nietzsche framed things in. And I want to the reason why this is an intro video is I wanted to explain that the core theme of talking about Nietzschean mythology is to kind of just understand the ways that it is Christianity and isn't, and is like very, very, very close to Christianity with minor differences, and why a philosopher like Friedrich Nietzsche and Soren Kierkegaard are very similar despite appearing radically different. And you can see the similarities when you look at their metaphysical mythology. Things like, I'm just going to name drop some Nietzschean stuff just so that you can like get an idea for what's in this video. Things like the eternal return. The woman who talks to Zarathustra in his, like, dream. Truth. The woman named Truth. What did she whisper to Zarathustra? Most people think it's the eternal return, but nobody knows. It's like mythology. But it's really, 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 really important to anybody who, like, I don't believe in any philosophy. That's kind of the point of this whole channel. And Nietzsche himself said, you're supposed to try to tear men down, so tear me down. And I've torn him down a lot. That's like a whole point of the mythology series on Nietzsche is going to be about his mythology, and then the critical series on Nietzsche is going to just be about tearing him down, which is what he wanted people to do. And yeah, I've torn him down, and then there's a lot of other things that I think that like anyone can have insight. Whether they're likable or not, anyone can have insight. And Nietzsche never... I'm going to talk about who he really was and stuff because I've never emphasized that. I always want to separate the art from the author because I believe that art is more than the author. And that by focusing on the flaws of the author, you are taking away from the value the art could provide. Like the Marquis de Sade and Martin Heidegger. Not very, had some negative qualities, but you can still like not totally ignore their human experience and their interpretation of their human experience because you can learn something from it. As long as you don't say like, oh, well now I only believe in Nietzschean philosophy and the eternal return is literally the only possible thing that can be real or true. It's like, that was never the point. It's about having your own fundamental genuine beliefs that are grounded and that make sense and that fit. I'm going to show how Nietzsche's philosophy and mythology is it's crafted to be completely timeless. Any human in any era, even illiterate, it speaks to the core, just like Christianity does and Buddhism. Like, they last a long time because they don't even, it's not that they're right, totally right, but they tap into something that is really genuine to the human experience. So, I'm going to just give my final thoughts on Friedrich Nietzsche to, like, end the intro video. My final thoughts on Friedrich Nietzsche, so that no one has to ask me. It's ironically the very first thing I ever heard about Friedrich Nietzsche. And it was from a Christian professor. And he said, Friedrich Nietzsche is not someone to worship, but he did objectively, through dedication, come to understand how and why things happen in society, including ideals of beauty and religion, and like denying, like to deny that he objectively had insight that is like very, like a Dostoevsky, like a Kierkegaard, like he's a very special person, even though I probably wouldn't have been friends with him. There's a lot of special people I don't want to be friends with. Steve Jobs. Never would talk to the guy. I'd avoid him if I saw him, but I have to respect him for the things that he gave the world. It's like you don't like not use iPhones because Steve Jobs was an asshole. That's my final thoughts on Nietzsche, is that he wasn't right about everything, especially there are feminists now. Like I can't claim to like I just say like, oh, like I'm a feminist, but I can't claim to like be an activist for feminism. But there are like women, feminist activists who believe that Nietzsche was a feminist, and there's professors who have published books saying Nietzsche was a feminist. So who am I? It's like, okay, all I can say at that point on this channel is that there are people who genuinely believe Nietzsche is feminist, and in my opinion, that's one of the things that's one of the criticisms I've always maintained about Nietzsche, is that he was a sexist, despite his philosophy being what... It's so easy to just make his philosophy not sexist. You have to just change like one tiny little thing, like beyond good and evil, you just make it so that women are truth. And that's like correct in almost every context. And my whole argument is that there's some context where he clearly meant women and not truth. The one where he compares Eastern society and Eastern men as being the ideal man. It's interpreted as him not saying what's right and wrong, but it's like, dude, I've read enough philosophy, man. Like, I can tell the change in tone when it's like the Eastern men do it right by keeping their women under the boot. And it's like, oh, he was just saying that that's what the Eastern men believe. And it's like, read it. Like, really learn Nietzsche. You can't just like read it out of context. You have to know him and how he talks and how he writes. And like, you'll get what I mean, in my opinion. But I'll never say that a professor, she knows Nietzsche even better than me. But there's people who know Nietzsche even better than her who disagree with her. So I just consider it a really cool, awesome, open argument. Was Nietzsche a feminist? And more importantly, what matters to me is, does it matter? He's dead. That's how I've always felt. He's dead. Who cares? You just take his philosophy, whether he was feminist or not, you just make it feminist and say, well, yeah, I think Nietzsche was awesome, but I think he was sexist, and so I'm a feminist. It's effectively the same as the person who thinks that he was a feminist, because you both have the same ideal of like what's right and wrong, not being sexist. So it's like, I just consider that like a cool argument. Like, it's fine. And like, I don't mean to like act like I'm like, oh, look at these idiots. When I do think that people are being idiots, I'll say it on this channel. That's the whole point of this channel, is that prejudice comes from people being idiots and not thinking enough. And all of my prejudices are because I don't think enough, because no one's smart enough to understand the whole world. So, but I notice that all my prejudices are because of the things that I don't know. And every time I've learned stuff, it's like, even though I only know like 0.3% of what I have to know to like know enough or whatever, every time I learn, I'm no longer prejudiced against the thing I learned about. So it's easy for me to just extrapolate that. Well, I don't have to literally know everything to know that, like, there's genuine truths to be found if you can look for them. But it's impossible to learn or look for. I mean, even the smartest people ever can, unless you're like a supercomputer and a super mind too, like combined. So, and, I write about those kinds of entities in my sci-fi. And so it's just to explore the philosophical concept. So yeah, like, I'm going to make the part 2 and just go into Nietzsche's... I'm specifically going to make a video. The first video in the Nietzsche Mythology series is going to be the, the ass, the lion, and the child, transformation through life. And a journey of maturity. So the ass, everyone's born an ass. You're born with the weight of the world on your shoulders and you're bearing it. But it's actually a costume that most people never take off, the weight off their shoulders. When you finally shed the weight and just feel better about yourself, and not so not just so distraught, like wanting to do heroin all the time, that's when you become the lion. And the problem with the lion is that once you take the costume off, you see how many other people didn't have clothes the whole time. Like, you see that other people were chill. You thought you lived in a cruel world, but you don't. And it makes you very, very mad at cruel people, because it's like your cruelty made me think everyone was cruel and they weren't at all. And it makes you really want to go after them. And that's the lion. And so, like, Nietzsche wasn't a violent lion. I'm not a violent lion. But it does feel like a general attitude of like aggressiveness, because you're a lion. And that's the phase I'm in. The last phase is the child, when the lion lays with the lamb, in biblical terms. That's when you can go to heaven. You can't be, lions go to Valhalla, but to go to heaven, the lion has to lay with the lamb to go to heaven. So you can see, like, Nietzschean philosophy, Nietzschean mythology is like, it's kind of Christian themes recontextualized because he thought that Christianity was so broken that it could never be fixed. And that's how I feel, that's where I disagree, and I'm more on Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky's side. But, like, he was still, besides his love for worldly power, or not love, but besides his valuing of people like Napoleon, people who like worldly power and greed, if you look at his own behavior, like, he was Christ-like in his behavior. He was very polite and kind to people. He was close friends with some of, like, the earliest feminists who ever lived, and that's the best argument that the feminists had, and I can't deny that. I think that he harbored sexist views that he expressed through his writing, but he was a kind-hearted enough person and Christ-like enough to still be, like, a kind, caring guy to the women he knew, because he was smart enough to know, like, yeah, that's my sexist prejudice, but I can't treat individual people like that. And there's a lot of people with racial prejudice. That's like the whole, like, I have a black friend thing. It's like, sure, like, I have this broader sexist prejudice, but at least he had a black friend, so to speak. He had a woman friend, and that's a good argument, but I don't fully agree with it for the same reason I don't fully agree with the had a black friend argument. It's like, it is relevant, and it does the tier, but it's not the whole story. Anyway, boom, baby. I guess I kind of figured, I'm going to go into the, the lion and child. And I'm being completely honest here, guys. I haven't read Nietzsche I haven't read any Nietzsche in like 8 years. But it's core to me, even though I'm, like, Christian. No, I'm not Christian. Well, this whole channel is going to be to basically argue about whether or not I'm Christian. Because I believe in, like, I don't believe in the Trinity. I believe that the Holy Spirit is the one God, and that Jesus, while being a man, became a living manifestation of the one God's will. Even though the one God doesn't have a will, it's a disposition, it's love, literally. So the only God is the Holy Spirit, the God of love. And Jesus opened his heart, just like how ISIS guys opened their heart. And he became, while still a man, a living manifestation of love, because he opened his heart to the God of love. And I don't care if that God is materially real or not. That's why Catholics, I feel like it's like consistent with the Eucharist, transfixiation, I think, because it's like, yeah, I believe too that it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter if it's bread. It doesn't matter if he was made of matter. And then the Holy Trinity is like, well, you also have to believe he was divine. And it's like, why can't I believe that he was just acting on the part of the divine? And I'm a Christian Gnostic. So I believe that God the Father is Yaldabaoth or something like that. I'm not like literally a Christian Gnostic, but I think that they had the right theme. Obviously their mythology is made up, but the Christian Gnostics were onto something when they were like, God the Father is Yaldabaoth, the God of the Old Testament, Satan. So God the Father is Satan. Jesus is the Word and the light from the Holy Spirit. And the God of love is very clearly not in charge of this universe. I'm sorry. And I think that Jesus was very clear about that. That's why he talked about to forget the world. And it's like, well, that's why Christian Gnostics, some of the earliest Christians, like, they came from before Nicaea, okay? So you can't, it's like, yeah, sure, Catholics say that they had, like, the core tradition the whole time. But if you're from before Nicaea, you're a Christian, because no one had decided what a Christian is yet. So these people believed in Jesus, very much so. They just believed that when he said, I came to fulfill the law rather than change it. To me, that means that, yeah, this is still Yahweh's universe. And Yahweh still makes the rules here, and it's a cruel freaking world. But I fulfilled it by giving Yahweh the sacrifice he demands, because he's an evil God, in order to let you guys out, set you guys free. And I kind of have like a My whole let you guys out and set you guys free is tied to an agnostic belief that this universe is a simulation, which is based on like mathematics and philosophy and technology. So like I have a grounding. So I think this channel can hopefully help people where I don't even want you to believe exactly what I believe. The whole point is that people need to do this exercise and have their own beliefs. And if your beliefs align with mine, you know, I think they will because I think I'm right. Welcome to people. Like, that's how Christians feel. That's how Muslims feel. Oh, like, once you explore everything, you'll think I'm right. It's like, well, yeah, because you think I'm right. You think you're right. So that's how I feel. But it's like, I just want people to open their minds without prejudice and come to their own conclusions, but without prejudice. So I feel like it's like, am I a Christian? I want to leave that up to like my first. Leave it in the comments. Am I a Christian? I'm pretty much a Christian Gnostic, except I'm also an Arianist. If you Google Arianism, that's the heresy that called Jesus just a man. Once again, my argument is from before Nicaea. You can't say they're less Christian, even if the Catholics are right that they had the core branch, which like I don't agree with them on that, but I don't even go into the argument because even if you're right, you can't say that Arians aren't Christian if it was before the Nicene Creed. That's just like